We can make a difference. BBC Radio Guernsey.
Now, if you've been out in town in recent weeks, you may have noticed the end of the night queues at the taxi rank snaking around the corner. But why exactly has it become so common to wait more than half an hour for a taxi in Guernsey? Well, shortages in the industry have been well documented, with many drivers choosing to retire or switch careers altogether throughout the pandemic. And reports now that a third of drivers have left the profession in the last 2 years. Well, our reporter Vicky caught up with two taxi drivers, Barry Harris and Ian Vodin, to ask them how business has been for them.
We've had quite a massive change actually over the last 18 months since COVID struck. We can divide our industry into three elements. We've got a corporate industry, a local industry and a tourist industry. In terms of the corporate industry, as you're probably aware, it's actually fallen to almost zero, and that looks set to continue for a short time. We hope next year it will start to pick up. The tourist industry has picked up slightly, but we're still seeing a lack of people coming through the airport. At the same time as cruise liners, we had 94 in 2 years ago. We've had none for the last 2 seasons. And then the local industry, and that's probably our highlight. A local industry has really picked up dramatically, and it's probably busier than we've known it actually for a number of years. But that, of course, doesn't make up for the other sides of the industry. So I guess you could say we're doing okay, but we're having to work a lot longer hours.
And from your perspective of Baz's taxis, where would you say you're spending most of your time and energy?
Most of my time and energy is, as Ian said, on the local industry. The tourism for people travelling to and from Guernsey, corporate, there's still nothing there. But the holiday makers, it's there, but it's nowhere in the numbers that it was 2 years ago.
And how is it affecting your day-to-day? You said you're working longer hours. Are you making the same amount as you did before, or even a fraction?
I'd say we are getting back to around 80 to 90% of where we were, but the difference is we're having to work a lot longer to get to that number that we previously got to, and that can be quite off-putting to new drivers if they're going to have to work antisocial hours and longer, so we're struggling to attract new drivers.
I concur with that. You're having to work, I reckon, 40% more hours at least just to get 70 to 80%. I wouldn't say 80 to 90%. For a new driver, it's a big investment. You're going to have to, if you want to make money, I would say buy your own plate rather than work for somebody else as the current system stands.
And so, for example, I know we were speaking before, Ian, you were saying that for the money that you make on doing a tour, showing people around the island on a cruise, in one kind of showing around, being a guide, is a whole Saturday night doing short distances.
So where you'd normally work, a long shift during the day, if you do one cruise ship tour, you're pretty much saying that's covered your whole of your expenses for one day, and that leaves you to have a little bit of time at home maybe, or spend time with your children in the summer. And this year that's not been an option for most of the drivers that are still working.
And you said that there's a shortage of drivers. Is it because people have retired because of the pandemic? Is it because of the expense of the plates? Is it the antisocial hours? What do you think?
I'm not sure what the problem is, but I have spoken to a couple and they said it's the cost of passing the test that's worrying them. I think it's anything between £500 and £700, depending on how well you do on the various sections. And if the government want to increase the number of taxi drivers, I think the simple solution would be if the government could take that cost on themselves for now.
And I'd actually have to agree with what Barry's saying. I'm new to the industry, I've been doing it for 3 years, and it is cost prohibitive, the start of, to lay out £500 and not know if you're going to pass the test. That's the other side. So for me, if the government could help us in that way, or maybe come up with an apprenticeship scheme where you could have drivers in the cars for a period of time and then move them forward.
And do you think the pandemic had an impact on the amount of drivers at all?
I think we were slightly short drivers, in my own opinion, before the pandemic, but that's just accelerated out, and it's now a massive issue. And trying to get a 50-50 driver to help me in my car has become actually impossible.
I think if they want to attract younger, newer people into the industry, the government needs to help with the funding of that.
And with your own business, have you managed to attract any new drivers?
I haven't taken on anyone, and I am certainly finding it a struggle to attract anyone. I think the other part of the problem is that there's a number of drivers who've actually moved to different jobs now. So they've had 18 months. After 3 or 4 months, they'd have realised that they were going to have a struggle for a long time. And now a lot of those drivers have gone into deliveries for household goods. And some of them have gone to work in hotels. So actually, we've lost a number of people.
So you were saying to attract more people to your business, to your own company, it would be to perhaps investing in apprenticeship schemes?
I think an apprenticeship scheme is one way to do it, and I certainly know for the bigger companies, and I'm a very small company, but for the bigger companies who've got multiple cars, I think that would be the right way of going forward. You've got the help of a link, so we've got 20 odd cars on our link. That would mean actually we could help that apprentice actually get out there, start their driving, help them learn the places they need to go.
That's our reporter Vicky Carter speaking to taxi drivers Ian Vodin and Barry Harris. Well, President of the Committee for Environment and Infrastructure, Deputy Lindsay de Summeray, is now calling for an independent review of the industry to assess how it's operating and how it should be regulated. Our reporter Penny Elderfield is live at the taxi rank this morning. Good morning to you, Penny.
Good morning, Claire. Yes, a wet and miserable morning out this morning, and the commuter traffic really starting to stack up around us at the taxi rank down here at the Weybridge. Actually, a small queue of taxis waiting this morning for passengers rather than the other way round. With me is the President of Environment and Infrastructure, Deputy Lindsay de Summeray. So you're wanting to do a review of the taxi industry. What's brought that about? What sort of problems are you hearing about?
Well, actually, we were planning to do a review of the industry before COVID struck, and then obviously had to put it on pause because there was no way at that time, when we were going into our first lockdown, etc., that there was any way we could carry out a review that would give us any meaningful results. So we wanted that to take place as soon as possible, and we think now is the appropriate time.
The sort of issues we're hearing about from passengers' point of view is there not being taxis there. From a taxi driver's point of view, there not being the work there. So there seems to be some sort of disconnect between the two.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is exactly the kind of thing that the review will be looking into. It's got a very broad scope, in fact, but availability is one of the key components, as is affordability, and of course we do need to make sure the industry works for the people who are actually providing that service as well.
What answers would you like that review to provide?
Really, we're looking for recommendations. We're expecting some recommendations to come forward as a result of the review on the appropriateness of licensing measures and perhaps how they could be improved, and various other issues as well. So we're looking for pragmatic recommendations that we would be able to action in order to improve the service for everyone.
A lot of the problems have come about because of COVID, because of the changes we've seen in society during the pandemic. Post-pandemic, we don't know what the new normal will be. How do you find solutions for an unknown?
It is one of the problems, isn't it? I mean, I think things are becoming clearer. You know, we are in that period of transition towards the new normal, and that is one of the core challenges. I think what we can be sure about is that things have changed, and also we were going to review the industry before the pandemic as well. So there were some, it's not like everything was perfect and we just need to get it back to normal. There was a need for a review in the first place, and I know that the industry is keen, and I know a lot of the travelling public is keen for us to, make some improvements overall.
One of the barriers perhaps that we've heard about this morning is the costs of getting into taxi driving, and a part of that being the £500 test fee. Do you think there's any room to budge on that, or is that something that you think could change in future?
It's absolutely all part of the scope. I mean, one of the specific terms of reference in the review is how we attract drivers into the industry, so that will be looked at in the round.
We also heard from drivers saying they're working much longer, more unsociable hours, getting a fraction of the pay, that the industry perhaps is just less attractive to work in. Are you concerned that this decline we've seen in numbers may just go on whilst that's the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important. I think, it is a tough job and in particularly challenging circumstances. And I think it is important to recognise that taxi drivers have played a really key role in the pandemic, especially in terms of transporting people, critical workers, for example, that we had to bring to the island through lockdowns, transporting them to and from the ports and things like that. So, they have provided a very valuable role throughout the pandemic. But yeah, it is a challenging job, particularly at the moment.
And can you put a time on when you hope this work will be completed?
I don't have any specific time frames. We have got it started as soon as we were able, but we are still at the beginning of that process, so it's not going to be done in the next few weeks, but I will keep you posted.
Deputy Lindsay de Summery, thanks very much for talking to us this morning.
That is Penny Elderfield, who is at the taxi rank in St Peterport with Deputy Lindsay de Summery, President of the Committee for Environment and Infrastructure. You're listening to BBC Radio Guernsey. It is 17 minutes to 8. After the news at 8 o'clock, we're going to be catching up with the President of Education, Sport and Culture. She's going to be here to answer questions about the state's decision on secondary education in Guernsey. If you've got a question you would like to put to her, get in contact with us here at BBC Radio Guernsey. You can text it in directly to the studio 07786 200 932. We'd love to hear your questions to the President of Education, Sport and Culture this morning.
Across the Channel Islands. I've been doing the show for close to 3 years now, and I've realised I've never come up with a tagline.
Tim Hunter.
Well, every week I get someone on to review video games, films, books, or fashion trends, so maybe Tim Hunter, trendsetter.
How would you feel about going out in your bathrobe?
Yeah, maybe not. Oh, how about Tim Hunter with all the big names, like the time I hung out with Brit Award-winning Arlo Parks.
I feel like because I am so open emotionally, it kind of invites that same